Hi, I'm Andrew Beattie, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Down to Business. Giving tips to people on how to help them generally, if they're looking from a financial aspect, but more specifically business owners. It can be a lonely old world out there, and if we can give a few tips, all the better. One of the topics we want to address today is, around financial advisory. Most business owners spend a lot of time building wealth, working hard. So what we want to focus on really is what should we be looking at after they've built that wealth, after they can start to look at things outside the business, give themselves a bit of diversity, asset protection, etc., to set themselves up longer term, which is generally the reason we're getting into business. To help us with that, today I'm joined by Mr. Craig Sawyer from PKF Wealth. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Andrew.
And I'll let you give a bit of an intro about yourself and specifically how you work with business owners.
I'm 52. I've had the pleasure of working with the PKF Group for 26 years. Started off in accounting, like yourself, went into self-managed superannuation and landed in advice. And as the business has grown, we've built a business within the accounting advisory space to try and help support clients, business owners in the provision of financial advice.
It's fair to say, I think, you understand not just from advising to businesses, but you come from a family of business owners.
My family, my father started in Ep.12 with Peter Cochrane, so he's now 81 and been out of the business since 2006. They started in 1968, and that business has grown to, I think it's 1,000 people. So pretty proud, in terms of what he's achieved, and some of his values have been instilled in me during my working career.
And some of those lessons also of, what to do then outside of the business we can talk about today.
Well, it's been good to be on both sides of the fence too. I started my career and working career as a boilermaker, and then went into accounting, superannuation and financial services, and those three components seem to go hand in hand.
Okay. Financial planning, financial advisory. We hear it thrown around quite a bit, whether it be talking to someone at the pub, right down to the media, to more recently Royal Commission, that sort of stuff. And we'll get to that. But realistically, what is financial advisory at its purest, and why is it important?
I think the first thing you've got to do is understand the individual you're talking to and what are the things that are important to them. I think financial advisory is more than just providing advice. It's providing support to someone, whether it be in terms of estate planning or looking at taxation planning, investments. We don't really look at financial advisory in a normal sense. We have what we call a model called the Future of Choice, which you guys obviously follow as well, which is about putting the individual in the centre of their world and look at all the aspects, whether it be debt management, investments, taxation. But at the end of the day, we're trying to get them to see where they are. We look at their life as three phases, whether it be debt, accumulation and retirement, and seeing where they sit within that framework and understanding what do they want to achieve, both personally and financially, because we find as we build our relationship with these people, it becomes more than just financial advice. You actually start to do other things. I've helped them buy a house, help them sell a property. I'm now doing a transaction at the moment around pink diamonds, which I just, 20 years of my life, I find myself doing something like this, which is interesting, but unique in itself.
Yeah, right. And I guess, let's face it, there's some areas of the industry that's always been a bit tainted. Talk to me about that and what people should be looking out for.
I would say I've been doing this 20 years. I've been with PKF 26. This was well overdue, the Royal Commission. If you think about it, it started off as probably a banking crisis with credit, loans. And what the banks have tried to do is own the food chain, a bit like you look at Rupert Murdoch, how they've set their business up. They make movies, they sell the content, they own the company that provides the tickets. The banking sector's tried to do the same thing and hasn't been able to warehouse each of those components. In 2012, our business received an award, and Gail Kelly said at the time, they had 600,000 customers that earned over 100 grand a year, and their penetration for super, insurance and investments was 4%. So that was basically their line in the sand where they wanted to improve, I suppose, their activity rates across their client base. They haven't been able to do it too well. If I was giving advice to a client independent of our firm, I would say you would keep away from A&P, only because it's going through a very significant period of change, and any bank-aligned financial advisor, because unfortunately they've always been product cloggers.
But I think some of the good things that's come out of that Royal Commission, and again, for people generally that are investing, but also business owners to be looking out for, is some of the newly enforced education requirements, some of the regulation around what you can and can't do, and conflicts of interest. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've got an accounting background, as I said before, and I think what they need to move towards is they need to start to classify the retail market and say, well, if you've got a client that's sophisticated, who's got a business structure, that you need to have an accounting background. I mean, as you know, we work well together because we also look again at that future of choice model and saying, where do we fit in that relationship, making sure the accountant, the advisor, the lawyer, the insurance person, all working towards the same outcome for the client.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things I'd add to that, when people are trying to look and say, well, someone wants to give me financial advice, and this is just a personal opinion, but one I share, is make sure the people giving you financial advice is actually done okay for themselves in the first place.
Correct.
It's like going and I'm going to bungee jump. Well, if I'm going to bungee jump, I want to make sure the person giving me advice has done it a lot of times and make sure they know what they're talking about. I think it's the same thing here.
Yeah, I do totally agree with that. I mean, I know there's real estate agents that don't own a home. I mean, it's funny, we just throw people into a role and say, off you go and do this, without looking at their background and their filters and what are the things that they've learned. I mean, I've learned more, I would say, off the job about people, and obviously financial advice, I can do a course and learn that. It's all the other bits that make you I think a holistic person.
So off the back of that then, you said, your comment about maybe institutions to select, what else should people be aware of off the back of something like the Royal Commission and then what the industry's going through change at the moment?
I think you're right. What you touched on education requirements is like really understanding the history of the person that's actually providing you advice. How long have they been with the organisation? How do they get paid? How does the organisation...
Touch on that one, how do they get paid?
Well, some people are paid a salary, right? There's others that get paid to convert, which means they've got to sell. Now, we have in our business, we pay people a base salary. There is no bonus around that. And that took us a 10-year time frame to make those adjustments because we don't want any conflict around giving advice with any client. And sometimes you would say to a client, look, I can't help you right now. Go off and pay your home loan off. I'm not going to put that in writing to you, just to do that. But that's the first step in the bedrock of, again, those three phases: debt, accumulation and retirement.
Okay. So I guess with that whole financial advice investment market or protection for that matter, well, before I go further than that, maybe we break it down. In that financial advisory, we've got asset protection, I guess risk, investment, superannuation,
Centrelink, aged care.
Maybe talk about some of the differences where people need to focus on, especially given the age demographic.
Well, I'll give you an example. I manage 130 client groups with a team of people, and the average age in that client base would be well over 65. So because I've been with most of those people for 15 years, I've seen them go through the accumulation retirement journey. Now, some of them are getting into their 80s. It's what's the next step for them? So again, aged care is a very specific environment. Most of the people we deal with that are high net worth individuals don't want to go to an aged care facility, but there's other things you've got to consider, whether it be downsizing the home. We've now got new rules around super to allow people to do that. So really, the advice paradigm that I follow is really very bespoke to the client base that I've got.
And you mentioned, aged care, for instance. In all of these video series we've been doing, the common theme's been having a plan. Having a plan. I don't care what it's been, planning ahead, making sure you're focused to what you're trying to achieve. Tell me about how you actually work practically with clients, because that plan will often change depending on where they're at in their life cycle. And I'm thinking more that business owner, but the business owner now being, whatever age they are, yes, it'll put more focus as they get older, but it needs, I'm sure, to have some sort of plan and focus to outside of the business.
When people come to you, 9 times out of 10, they don't actually know there's a financial problem or there's a potential issue in their life. It could be restructuring assets. The first thing we would do with a client, though, with our Future of Choice program would be is, how old are you? When do you want to retire? Do you understand what that date looks like? And we do a calculation, which is...
What do you want to live off in retirement?
Well, we do a calculation to say, well, if you're earning X amount of dollars now and you were retired today, would it be the same amount of money? Do you want to travel? What are all those things you want to do? Because that will help form the basis of that calculation. We then do that calc, which can look quite scary for some people, and work backwards to then say, well, we have all these assets here. We put some nominal returns on that. We consider what's happening in their family budget, etc., and plan and then benchmark that every year, because we have budgets change at a federal level, cash flow changes, other people have personal expenses, whether they've got kids, they've got married. Yeah. Most people own 3 homes in their life. I'm living now in my 5th, but most people will have 3 homes in their lifetime. So it's looking at all those aspects and then coming back to that calculation saying, well, mate, we might have to reset that, or we are ahead of time, which means you can either retire early. But one of the challenges I see with people retiring also is you need to retire to something, not from something. Because all of a sudden you've been working in a job or in your own business for 50 hours, you've put all your energy into that, and you go, well, what am I going to do now? And it does cause disruption in the family unit.
Well, I've seen some horror stories too, from depression to deaths and that sort of thing.
Or divorce, because the husband and wife haven't lived in the home, like under those conditions for the last 40 years. Yeah. And now you've got to reacquaint yourself with each other.
I think those calculations you mentioned too, and it's really a gap on where you need to be. That's a real, pardon the language, but a nice shit moment for most people, especially a lot of the clients that we get from other firms that come across. They've never looked at this kind of stuff, and for the business owners is the perfect time to be looking at earlier, because you can influence it. You know, your business is generally your cash cow to set you up for the rest of your life. So if we can know that earlier and know what you're working towards, and we can be working towards, you know, the performance hurdles in your business, we can be working towards acquisitions, we could be looking at, you know, bonus incentives for key people to attract them and build your business up. All in all, we're trying to grow the value of that business, not only the returns every year, but your absolute, you know, golden handshake, if you like, when you finish, to be able to maximise that retirement position. So I don't know too many people that have, you know, gone from eating out every night to baked beans and bread in retirement, and they're too happy.
And also too, I go back to that Future Choice program that you obviously had a part in building, is that we surveyed our top 50 clients, right? And most of them were business people, and said, why were you successful at the business? And they explained whether they had a marketing plan, operational plan, but again, keyword plan. They were very deliberate in what they did. We then unpacked their personal goals and said, well, let's apply the same rigour to, and it could be health, could be have you done enough in terms of breaking the nexus between your business and yourself, extracting money out, to start to build that framework outside here, because they are 2 distinct structures. And that's helped us at least provide really bespoke advice, because we also say to clients, look, I'm not going to sit here and say superannuation, give me all your money, or let's get some insurance policies. It's about looking at what you've got, because some people have got good assets. Others, you say, look, I don't know whether you want to retain that because of particular reasons. But it comes down to, one, the calculation, and then we determine what we should invest in.
Also the risk appetite.
Yeah, correct. You've got to actually understand how people feel about those things. And usually if you're dealing with a husband-wife, the risk appetite will be different. And that risk appetite changes over time, because we move into different phases of our life. Like in terms of how aggressive you are in your 20s and 30s might be totally different to how you are in your 60s and 70s.
That's a good point. I think, picking up on that point too, a lot of people I see, and not just, you know, young people, but even up to late 40s, 50s, some people say, oh, you know, I've still got time, I'll worry about that when I'm nearing retirement. And I think it's a fallacy, and people need to actually give themselves much more time to plan for a most successful succession and retirement living, if you like. You know, that will change, no doubt. You know, if you've got no kids, you probably haven't got as much focus on estate planning and that sort of stuff. If you haven't got a lot of wealth, you know, you're not focused on estate planning or investing as much. But it's getting that stuff in place so you can have the plan to get you in that position.
Yeah. Well, I ran a lunch last Friday for 30 of my clients, okay? It's just a thank you lunch because of the relationship I enjoy, and also, you know, the loyalty and support they provide our business.
And you don't mind a lunch.
And I don't mind a lunch, as you know well. But one of the things I said, and I rang one of my clients to say, can I reference you? I said, you've been with me 20 years. And I said to the group, When Gary and I first started, it was 15 to 17% returns in 1997, 98, 99. We then had the US was bombed. We then had Bali, etc. We then had 5 more years of good, solid double-digit growth. The Australian market doubled in size. We then had the GFC, which was 5 years where people still made income, but the unit price mostly and their assets pools went backwards. Right? It was a very big disruption to the world. Now when I'm sitting with a new client, we're still aiming for, let's say, a balanced portfolio might be 7%, but I'm saying we may be at 5 because inflation's gone from 3% to 1.6. The game has changed and the world is starved of growth. We see that, and the disruption you have geopolitically is incredible. It's just, so what we were doing 20 years ago is totally different to the expectations we're saying to people now, which means then they usually need more money.
Yeah, and I'll come back to that point of then how you practically work with clients, because I know a lot of people think, okay, for instance, I set up a self-managed super fund as opposed to an industry fund.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't manage it, but that's where your role comes in, even more importance. And talk practically how you work with clients, like on a visitation, a frequency.
Well, I started as an SMSF specialist, and I've got 100 clients with us as self-managed funds, right? And I'm closing 5 a year. That's because we might have started at 1.2 million, and now we're down to 300 or 400. It's not as effective. The cost structure outweighs the benefits. But most clients we would see at least twice a year, right? But I have some larger groups where I might meet with them 4 times a year, but I'll have contact with them at least every month. That's probably one thing I've noticed that's changed in my career in the last 10 years is I would probably have more contact, whether it be just a phone call to say, look, you've seen this happen. Because I have friends say to me, oh, you must have been inundated with phone calls when there's an event in the world happens, and I say, I don't. The reason why is the person who taught me about this role was you need to educate people. They may be smart at what they do and have experience, but educate them about how markets will behave and the role the media has as an interface between you and that market.
Okay. Couple more questions. So if we're looking at generally from an industry sense or your profession and how individuals, again, namely business owners, I guess, approach this, when it comes to financial advisory, what are some of the more common mistakes you see and will be good tips for people to look at?
If I look at, people think property is the magic bullet. I mean, I've had some good properties and I've had some bad ones. It's just, again, it comes down to your research piece. The second piece that we see with with clients that are business people is that the advisor that may be involved has not interacted with the accountant. Right? It is absolutely critical. It's almost like I can't have my meetings with you unless I've got your accountant sitting there with me, because they know your structure. They'll know all these other things that you may not recall that are very important in terms of understanding the inner workings of a company, and also making sure 75% of people you meet haven't got a properly structured will or have no will. So it's a really big thing that we've been focusing on the last couple of years. I mean, because unfortunately in my role, I've had 7 clients in my career pass away, and it does affect you because you get close to people and you really know how good someone's affairs are at that point. So as you know, we've built, which again you guys have had a lot to do, is the Wealth Portal, which has allowed us a place to house all of people's information so that when something does occur, we've got a go-to spot for everything. Because with business people, most people, when they finish their business career, they don't just shut their company up. They've still got money caught in it, or there'll be a family trust, and that's usually the bedrock. Most people that are in business get caught with a company, a family trust, and a super fund in retirement. It's not as simple as as people think.
Well, and to have your affairs in order also, because a lot of trauma and tragedy has just occurred, and people that are upset. You want to make sure that's not an easy process, because it's not going to be easy, but a seamless process to make, let them grieve in other ways. Okay. So, tell me, when you're specifically talking about business owners, we've spoken a lot about investment, we spoke a bit about estate planning. How else do you work with business owners from a relationship and advisory sense?
Again, come back to that future of choice. It's really about understanding the individual and getting down into their goals. Like, we would probably run 3 meetings across a new introduction to understand, where they fit. And in some cases, we may not invest any money. Their structure may be intact. And we are really just a sounding board to say, here's your asset pool, and here's reference to the market. I've got a couple of clients I do that for, where all I do is check in to make sure, because some people like to run their own money. I would say 3% of my client base, but I do think that's shifting a little bit, and that's as a direct impact or result of the Royal Commission, is that the trust has been lost in the marketplace. I mean, I love my job and my career, but the industry has disappointed me in that sense, because again, self-interest has come into play.
Yeah, no, I've seen a lot of that where, especially when there was a variation between what one, investment provider would pay for a referral to the next one. Maybe a skeptic, but I think there's a fair few people that didn't necessarily do the right thing by the client, but went after the right thing for them. So. Yeah. Okay, so before I wrap up, are there any other comments or points you'd like to make with, I guess, financial advisory generally, but how business owners should be, interacting in this space?
I don't think you should leave it. A lot of people, I think, it's like an event that you go and see an advisor if you're made redundant. Somebody in your family may pass away and you get an inheritance, etc. Or for some reason there's that trigger event, which I've passed that milestone, age 50, is that you start to think, and the statistics show that most people don't look at their superannuation until it's the same value as a motor vehicle. They just put the statement in the drawer. It just sneaks up on us. I'm 52 and I've been with our firm for 26 years, and you go, where's that gone? I think the earlier you engage with a professional, even whether it be your accountant, to just start the conversation to understand what are all the things that I need to be consider. I mean, superannuation, since I've been in super, there's been more than 3,000 changes. And now, once we used to be able to get all of your money into that structure, because it's the best tax structure in Australia, now we're limited to 1.6 million per individual. Now that sounds like a lot of money, obviously to most people, but if you're running a business, it's like we just can't get all of your wealth into that structure. So again, it comes back to, I think, the earlier start planning, the better off you'll be.
Time's a wonderful thing.
You get to make other decisions. You don't have to necessarily retire at superannuation retirement age. You might want to go earlier, but you need to have structures built around you to have income. Because going from what we call an accumulator to a retiree is a very big mental shift. All of a sudden, you're not earning a salary anymore. You're now on your own devices. And that can disrupt people, because all of a sudden they start to see an asset pool diminish, whether it be a small amount, but they again are used to bringing money in all the time.
Yeah, and I think the other key thing there, and you touched on it earlier, but with the business owners is working with the accountant. Make sure you've got a financial advisor that either works with a good accountant, hopefully that's yours, or has that tax expertise in-house too, because a lot of the decisions that get made around some of the services you provide have a bearing that, if they don't take into account that tax effect, mightn't get the outcome that the advisor is intending.
Well, you look at the structure of our firm and you look at your role. I remember when I first started with Terry Lawler, an accountant had a particular skill set and certain attributes. Now that's changed. You're more of a business coach, and you have all the people behind you doing all of the other things, but your role has expanded more as a business person, project manager, versus someone who just did tax. And that's shifted significantly. And the same with an advisor. I mean, I don't do insurance. I've specialised in retirement markets and also estate planning, is because I think those two, it's a bit like working backwards, saying, is your will structured in a particular way? How do we need to do that? And working backwards with the client.
Yeah, that's good points. Well, I'm going to miss plenty in this wrap up. We've covered quite a bit, but I think from the first point of view, and what's consistent with all the videos, is you need a plan. You're working hard in your business, and not just business owners, but that's where we're aiming this at. You need to make sure you've got a decent plan to achieve the outcomes for you, your family, and next generations, etc., while you've got the opportunity. To get that plan perfect, I think we've said, we're going to allow a lot of time. As we've said before, the more pressure you've got around time, the less we can do, because that comes into regulation stuff, so make sure you've got time. Pet one of mine, make sure the person you're dealing with has actually done it for themselves or has a few runs on the board, not just they've got a ticket that they can get on theory. I think you want someone that's got experience and not only can talk through what they would do if it happened, but what they did when it happened.
And you've got to, I think, like the person you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
it's a relationship.
I've just lost a family member, and I spoke about that with some of my clients because we've got that bond. It's important to me, and it's certainly important to them. But I mean, you're going to work with this person.
Well, that's right.
For the next 15 or 20 years, or potentially 25, 30 years, depending on when you started your career, that you actually want to like and be able to share things.
That's a good point, because to get the best outcome, you need to share everything.
Yeah.
So Royal Commission was a big game changer. It's still actions coming out of that now. Make sure that education's covered. Make sure that there's no conflict there with the people you're dealing with, and they're doing it for the right reasons. I guess have your accountant involved is a key point I took out of that. From a business owner's point of view, so we want to understand the structures and the tax effect, etc. From a financial advisory point of view, there's a lot that these guys can cover, but just think specifically from business owner, you've got wealth creation, not just from what you do day to day, but how it can keep working for you. Asset protection and estate planning, very big one, especially if you're getting a bit on in life and you've got other family members. And I guess the third one there is really, general risk and insurances.
Yeah.
I think it's always good to have a view on what the risks are. Then you can make a call whether you self-insure, whether you get insurance, but it's something you definitely need to cover from a business point of view. And I guess, as you said just before, from a point of view of that financial advice, don't just get reactive when something necessarily doesn't go to plan, for a couple of months. Financial advice and getting your outcome is a long-term game plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered a fair bit. Hopefully you got something out of it. Thanks, Craig, for joining me.
Pleasure.
And until the next episode, cheers.